The walls are gone, but they are not what makes a house home. Even in the darkest time, life finds its way to the light, because the light is within us. And no matter how hard, scary and painful it is, we have a bright future. Every day we become stronger, from ruins to love, life and light. 121,000 destroyed buildings are not just statistics. For us, Ukrainians, it is still our home. Let's rebuild it together. United for the recovery of Ukraine.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Switzerland. Benvenute e benvenuti a Lugano for the Ukraine Recovery Conference 2022. I would also like to welcome all those who are joining us online, and a special welcome to President Zelensky, who is participating to this conference online. I'm Giada Marsadri, and I'm your Master of Ceremonies for the conference. We are gathered here in the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland for 2 intense days of discussion and exchange. Partners are coming from all over the world to meet and to have the opportunity for exchanges with an important Ukrainian delegation composed of officials, civil society, and members of the private sector. Ukraine faces enormous challenges, and we are all here to reflect on the best way to support Ukraine in these tragic circumstances. To officially open the conference, I have the privilege to call on stage the President of the Swiss Confederation, Ignazio Cassis. Buongiorno, Presidente.
Grazie, buongiorno. Thank you so much for this invitation to join the stage. Presidents, prime ministers, ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to welcome you here in Lugano. Switzerland and Ukraine have worked together to set up this conference. I would like to thank President Volodymyr Zelensky for his intensive cooperation during the preparations. We understand only too well, Mr. President, why you are following the conference from Kiev. So it is all the more important that Ukraine is represented in person by Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, along with a sizable delegation. For that, I am particularly glad. Thank you, Denis, for joining us. What binds all of us in this room together is the desire in this time of horror, wanton destruction and grief to provide the people of Ukraine with the prospect of a return to a life of self-determination, peace and a bright future. That road is long, but it is never too early to prepare for the time when the weapons fall silent. Until recently, the prospect of war on this scale on European soil against a sovereign country, against fundamental civil liberties and against humanity seemed almost impossible. Our attention was focused on other matters facing the international community and the planet. But Russia's act of aggression against Ukraine has forced us to unite and face up to this war with all the determination that we can muster, and to commit ourselves to supporting the sorely tried Ukrainian people on the long road to sustainable recovery. In concrete terms, in a first step, we want to draft a framework for a long-term reconstruction process in the shape of a final document, the Lugano Declaration. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today and tomorrow is about laying the groundwork for an effective and transparent political process, a process that is inseparable from the path of the reform, a process with regulated governance principles, a process with clearly defined criteria for handling assistance and for sharing roles between Ukraine, the states, the international community, the Bretton Woods institutions, and others, civil society and private sectors. And lastly, it is about what comes next. For after this, we are in for the long haul. Naturally, there are not questions that we can answer conclusively within the space of 2 days. But it allows us to get a clearer picture, set the framework, and commit to the process and to our participation, underlined by the principle that we want to adopt tomorrow within the framework of the declaration. These Lugano principles set an important first milestone. A prerequisite for success is that the original plan for the conference, focusing on institutional reforms, and the current plan, focusing on reconstruction, form a whole. The original program of annual Ukraine Reform Conferences was well on track, and I share the assessment that Ukraine's resilience is due in no small part to the reforms that have been then implemented. It is crucial that these efforts continue unwaveringly, especially in the fight against corruption, improving transparency, and the independence of the judiciary, and that they are not stalled by the war. The two pillars are not in competition with each other. They strengthen each other. Reconstruction should give rise to recovery. The sustainable reconstructing of the economy should be guided by the principle of building back better and create the conditions for prosperity and intact livelihoods. These issues too will be discussed here in Lugano, with, of course, a view to Ukraine. The 3 R's, reform, resilience, and recovery, thus form a continuum. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank all of you for taking part in this conference today and tomorrow, whether in person or by video link. Many of you have taken the time to travel to Lugano in person. Again, thanks a lot. The Nobel Prize winner Hermann Hesse wrote, I quote, "Where friendly paths meet, the whole world looks like home for a time." In fact, he used to live near here with his wife Ninan, who had Ukrainian roots. So, let us evoke the spirit of Lugano for a successful conference, so that Ukraine can once again be a lasting home offering a bright future for all, including those who have fled and those who have been displaced. Thank you so much. Grazie per l'accoglienza. I now have the great honor and the pleasure to hand over the floor to the President of Ukraine, Mr. Volodymyr Zelensky. Welcome.
Greetings, Mr. President.
Welcome, Volodymyr Zelensky. The floor is yours. Welcome to Lugano. Welcome to Switzerland.
Дуже дякую.
Thank you very much indeed.
Шановний пане президенте,
Dear Mr. President Kassis, dear Madam President von der Leyen,
шановний пане прем'єр-міністр,
dear Mr. Prime Minister Fialo, dear participants of the conference, dear ladies and gentlemen, above all, let me thank Mr. President of Switzerland and his team and everyone who has taken part in organizing of our conference. It is this conference and its decisions that can become the first huge step towards the historic victory of the democratic world. Russia's war against Ukraine is not simply an attempt to seize our land and destroy our state institutions or break down our independence. It is a far greater confrontation, the confrontation of outlooks. The anti-democratic and anti-European system which is built in Russia seeks to prove that it is allegedly mightier than all of us, Ukraine, Europe, and the democratic world. It seeks to prove that Europe is supposedly weak and supposedly unable to defend its values. And this motive of outlook can be traced in all actions of the Russian state, be it in regard to Ukraine or in regard to all of you. All crises of Russian making, the inflation crisis, the food crisis, the energy crisis, migration crisis, whose contours are already plain to see. That is the test of outlooks and ideology. But still, the most cruel of its manifestations is Russia's aggression against our state, against us, the first whom it seeks to bring back to its zone of control in Europe.
Погляньте, що робить Росія, руйнуючи Україну. Росія знищує простір усього, що має значення для нас і для будь-якого вільного людського життя.
In 4 months of the full-scale invasion into Ukraine, 2,102 educational establishments have been destroyed. These are schools, universities, and kindergartens. When the Russian army is using artillery against the kindergarten or is throwing bombs on school, it is not destroying simply walls, not just buildings. That is the deliberate destruction of educational space, the space where the socialization of the children takes place, where they learn to be human. All of our societies have just recovered from the COVID pandemic, when for a long time the studies took place in remote manner. No sooner had it started to recover, no sooner had our children started to find themselves in the usual place of communication, friends and studies, than Russia came with its missile strikes, seeking to say that Ukraine is not going to have this space of education. Why does Russia need to shell hospitals? How can they give orders to carry out aviation strikes against hospitals or maternity wards? That is the manifestation of Russia, which is supposedly able to destroy Ukraine's very opportunity for a civilized life, the basic humanity which can be found in any normal country. Russia is showing that Ukrainians will not be able even to cure or to give birth to children. 799 objects of medical infrastructure have been destroyed since the 24th of February to the end of June. What other country, what other war has seen the destruction of medical facilities on such a scale, in such a short time frame? All of it is Russia's deliberate tactic. It's not just shelling, that's the bet they place on the ideological confrontation. The terrorist state hopes that this destruction will become the proof of the supposed inability of the democratic system and the European choice of our nation to give people at least some, let alone normal life. Take a look at the systemic destruction by the Russian army of residential blocks of our cities and the constant missile terrorism. Why are they doing it? It's not just about pure military tactic. Every person has the space of her own home. It's just not flat or a house. It's part of the city or the rural community where people communicate, work, sees friends, loves, raises children, visits parents. That is exactly why Russian occupiers are shelling the residential buildings or use artillery against residential blocks in cities. That is exactly why they use rockets against residential places to destroy this space of lives, to kill the feeling of home in people's souls. More than 12 million Ukrainians have been forced to flee the war. And how many of them will eventually come back home, even if they have a chance to return where they used to live after this cruel war and the barbarian Russian strikes? Many people will find it difficult to restore this feeling of true home. Russian aggression is still raging, and nearly 80,000 of objects have been destroyed, which is tens of millions of square meters. When we see such losses, we must see not only the broken walls or shattered bricks, not just scorched corridors or rooms, but millions and millions of human fates which are not going to be the same. We must see the dreams which are no longer there, the love which has become impossible. We must see the children which could have been alive and have the likes of yours, but now their lives are destroyed. Many Ukrainian children are now bereft of houses, of friends by Russia. Russia has turned them into orphans. It has killed their sisters and brothers. Russia's aspiration is to turn these ruins and these losses into the supposed vision of democracy in Europe as well. By this aggression, Russia seeks to prove that it is supposedly dominating not only a territory but life per se, and that allegedly it can decide whether other people will have life at all. Therefore, this war is not only our war, it is not simply a local war somewhere in the east of Europe. No, that is a Russian invasion against everything that we hold dear. Therefore, the reconstruction of Ukraine is not a local project, it's not a project of one nation, but a common task of the entire democratic world. All countries who can say that they are civilized. Restoring Ukraine means restoring principles of life, restoring the space of life, restoring everything that makes humans human. Of course, this implies construction, large-scale construction. Of course, it implies great funding and colossal investment. And of course, it implies the absolutely new level of security in all of our country, which will be forced to continue living beside Russia. But it also implies a new technological level. It implies also an opportunity for our countries and our companies and our specialists to show why freedom is mightier than any tyranny. In spring this year, we started proposing our partners to join the project of recovery in Ukraine, and it was apparent back then that it would be the most ambitious project of our time, the economic, technological, social project, but most of all, the project of outlook. And I'm grateful to all the countries which have responded positively to our proposal to take patronage over regions, cities, or industries affected by the war, particularly, I thank Denmark, to take patronage over the reconstruction of the city of Mykolaiv. I thank the United Kingdom for their interest in restoring the Kiev Oblast. And I also invite other countries of the civilized world, ambitious companies and specialists to join our effort. Apart from that, it will allow creating millions of new connections in the democratic world in Europe among our countries. Every city, every community, every industry which will be restored will serve as a historic proof that other countries helped us. Just imagine, it's not just about the flags of the partner country at the entry to the city, but the fact of being interwoven into the new fabric of life in Ukraine, the new traditions and results of work of everyone who contributed to the recovery. And of course, I thank the European Commission for the initiative to establish a special European platform for the recovery of Ukraine. But all the initiatives, plans and ambitions must be part of a single system where not only the needs, but also the feelings of Ukrainians will be at the forefront. Therefore, Ukraine proposes its own national recovery plan, which can serve as the basis for realizing every initiative, every idea, and to use funds in Ukrainian interest in a rational and effective way that can be channeled to Ukraine's recovery. Among the key principles, I would mention the following: maximum security, maximum technological advancement, maximum adherence to environmental standards, maximum usage of green technologies, maximum realization of barrier-free principles, a maximum orientation on community interest, maximum transparency in planning, usage of funds and selection of projects, as well as maximum entrenchment of the restoration project into the real economic life in Ukraine, and to ensure that the results of the recovery work for the long term, which will allow creating new jobs and new industries in Ukraine, localize your businesses, your business processes in our country. Of course, we are not talking about only the recovery of the fabric of life, but also institutional development. Our state has become the candidate for the membership in the European Union. The movement towards the full-fledged membership requires reforms, but Ukraine's recovery also requires reforms. We must strengthen our institutions further on. We must further improve the standards of life. And our aim is to ensure that Ukraine is not only the freest country in Europe and the most comfortable country for living and businesses, but also to ensure that we can fulfill all the political tasks facing us of all countries who have ever moved to the European Union. We can do it like we have put into practice the biggest reform for the European countries, for the Euro-Atlantic community. That is the most important reform which have been put to practice. That is the reform of uniting the European community. And now we are all united thanks to Ukraine. And thanks to this reform of ours, we have actualized every of the basic values of Europe, just like the support of NATO countries implies that we have united the alliance. And this unity in NATO has not been seen for dozens of years. The reconstruction of Ukraine will also become our great reform, but because we are uniting the democratic world, that it is plain to see for everyone that the outlook of free people always prevails. The world will see that anyone will ever be able to use war to accomplish its purposes. But now I would like to make one very important local emphasis. We need to act this very moment. A major part of the territory of Ukraine has already been liberated, which is more than 1,000 localities, but a major fraction of our territory is still facing challenges, economic, energy, social challenges. We need to restore school studies, we need to provide medical services and give housing to IDPs. We need to guarantee jobs for Ukrainians, protect the energy field. It is important now, at this very moment. especially as the winter is approaching, therefore will present two levels of action, the strategic one, which implies the restoration of all country, as well as the tactical one, which means that we need this tactical help. This implies the necessity of restoring everything that can be restored now, this very moment. Ladies and gentlemen, until ruins are there, this war will continue until the aggressor can hope that the very basis of life can be destroyed. Then there cannot be any long-lasting peace. Therefore, the reconstruction of Ukraine will be the greatest contribution to the maintenance of global peace, the most global peace of all. We can prove that the democratic world is mightier, that Europe is mightier, and that our values cannot be obliterated, and we are definitely going to do it. Thank you for your attention, and I invite all of you to Ukraine in order to visit the greatest, the most wonderful country in the world, in order to work together with us. At the very beginning of the presentation, Mr. President Kasi said that he sees the sizable delegation of Ukraine in the hall, quite a great one, it seems. Well, Mr. President, I was also quite impressed that our delegation is quite big. And I would honestly like to invite some of the people whom I've seen through the screen. I have not seen them in a couple of months. I'd like to invite all of these people to visit Ukraine, because we are having the recovery in Ukraine, the recovery of our country, and I would like to remind them of it. I think that this is of tremendous importance because the war is raging in Ukraine and these people are working in Ukraine. Well, I think this is a gentle hint of mine to all these people. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, President Zelensky, and best wishes for all the important work you and Ukraine have ahead. A cultural program has been organized alongside this conference as a sign of solidarity with the refugees and those who have remained in Ukraine. Ukrainian culture is rich and diverse, and we have now the pleasure of sharing with you some of this wealth, thanks to Robert Kowalski. He is the concert master of the Orchestra della Svizzera Italiana. Robert Kowalski will play Melody by the Ukrainian composer Miroslav Skorik. Buongiorno, Robert. Grazie mille a Robert Kowalski. L'appuntamento con la musica è ancora questa sera. I would like to remind you that tonight there will be a solidarity concert at the LAC, Lugano Arte Cultura Cultural Center, by the Orchestra della Svizzera Italiana. The Ukrainian pianist Oleksiy Botvinov will be playing. The concert is public and starts at 8:30 p.m. At 9 p.m., the public open-air concert with Ukrainian artists at Manzoni Square will begin. And from 10 p.m. there will be a DJ evening. You are all warmly invited to our musical events tonight. And now it's my honor to invite on stage Madam Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission. Welcome to Lugano.
President Zelensky, President Kassis, many thanks for hosting this fantastic conference here. Prime Minister Shmihal Denis, it's wonderful to see you again. Speaker of the Parliament, the Rada, Mr. Stefan Schuk, also good to see you again. Dear Prime Minister Fiala, as Presidency of the European Union, dear Prime Minister Simonaite, you hosted last year the conference, Prime Ministers, Ministers, Excellencies, honorable guests. 1 month ago, a young Ukrainian hero died on the battlefield as he fought for the future of his country. His name was Roman Ratushny, and he would have turned 25 tomorrow. Roman belonged to a new generation of young Ukrainians. As a teenager, he was among the first protesters on the Maidan, demonstrating for Europe and for the democracy. And ever since, Roman never stopped fighting for a better Ukraine. He fought for a corruption-free Ukraine, both as activist and journalist. He fought for a greener Ukraine, leading the movement to save a natural park in Kyiv from illegal constructions financed by oligarchs. He fought for sovereign Ukraine, and he paid the ultimate price for it. Roman's life was taken too early, but his dreams live on. The dream of a new Ukraine, not only free, democratic and European, but also green and prosperous. A place that Ukrainians' golden generation can finally feel their own. It is this dream that brings us here today. Because with our support, our Ukrainian friends can rebuild Ukraine, not just as it was, but as its young people want it to be. I know that this may sound overly ambitious, as Russian bombs keep falling, shattering not only schools and hospitals, but also countless lives. But all of us know by now that nothing is impossible to the brave people of Ukraine. You have just heard the determination in the words of President Zelensky. And we will soon listen to the details of the plan from Prime Minister Shmihal. We know Ukraine's immense potential for positive change. We know it because we have seen it affirmed time and again since the Maidan Revolution 8 years ago. Ukraine has progressed visibly since February 2014, when the revolution of dignity began. It was the only country in Eastern Europe to pass legislation to rein in the oligarchs' powers. Or take the reform of the administration and decentralization. It is a success. We see it that the administration does function despite this atrocious war. And this is also true for digitalization. With Europe's support, Ukraine has created state-of-the-art e-government services and an impressive cybersecurity machine. Decentralization and digitalization have made Ukraine stronger. And this experience, how reforms work, will be precious for the reconstruction of Ukraine. Because Ukraine will need courageous reforms. But reforms should go hand in hand with investment. We all know the scale of destruction is staggering, and costs are rising with each day of this senseless war. This is also true for social costs. Victims, veterans, women, children, they are coming back from exile. That is good. But Ukraine will have to care for them. Ukraine will have to restore business confidence and attract more capital from abroad. Ukraine will have to improve living standards for its citizens. And Ukraine will advance on its path towards the European Union. The challenges are huge, without any question. But they are not insurmountable. Ukraine can emerge from this war on a path towards a stronger and more modern country, with a modernized judiciary, with stronger institutions, with a solid track record to fight against corruption, but also with a greener, more digital, and more resilient economy. This is the country that so many Ukrainians, like Roman Ratushny, are dreaming of and fighting for. And this is why we are here today. The task ahead of us is colossal, as President Zelensky said. All of you here in the room and many more elsewhere on the screens want to support and help rebuild Ukraine. And this is not only in our interest, it's also in our interest, but it is also our moral duty, our moral obligation. And this is why the European Commission has proposed to the government of Ukraine to set up a reconstruction platform, to map investment needs, to coordinate action, to channel resources, and of course in support of an ambitious reform agenda. This platform will be the place to shape strategic orientations and priorities for our common work, to focus on future-proof reconstruction, moving towards climate neutrality, embracing the digital decade, building a social market economy that leaves no one behind, ensuring security and defense, and all of it embedded in good governance. Ukraine will be in the lead because our action will be driven by the aspirations and the desires of the Ukrainian people. That is so important. The platform will bring together countries, institutions, the private sector, and civil society. Our partners from around the globe, from Switzerland to the United States, European and international organizations, from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, that is already working in Ukraine, and I really commend you for that, to the European Investment Bank, from the IMF to the World Bank. And of course it will involve business and business associations with all their incredible know-how. We need that know-how, we need that expertise. Just recently in Davos, Prime Minister Schmihal and me, we have seen the keen interest of companies and entrepreneurs to get involved in the reconstruction of Ukraine. The platform will be open to everyone who cares about the future of Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe has a special responsibility and a strategic interest to be at Ukraine's side every step of the way. Ukraine wants to be part of our European Union, and we want Ukraine to become a member of the European Union. Ukraine is highly motivated to work with us in this direction, and we will do our utmost to support these efforts. Because the path towards a stronger Ukraine and the path of European integration are one and the same. Through the Reconstruction platform, the European Commission can offer its extensive expertise in running programs that combine reform and investments. And in addition, we've been working very closely with Ukraine for a long time. And this work will only intensify now that Ukraine has formally become a candidate country to join our European Union. This Prime Minister Shmyhal and Chairman Stefanchuk is your applause. It was your job, your work. You've done it. So from my part to many great. But of course, besides our own expertise, we would like to bring in external expertise and external advice. And thus, Chancellor Olaf Scholz and I, in very close cooperation with our international partners, we will organize a high-level international conference after the summer. We want to bring together the brightest minds and the leading global experts on reconstruction. We have never done it at that scale before, so that we can ensure that this generational undertaking is done in the right way. We have a huge opportunity, we should use it. And if we have a good plan, if we have a sound plan, if we have a comprehensive plan, this will give the necessary confidence to all investors. It will give them the message, your money not only serves a good cause, it does serve a good cause, but it will be first and foremost spent efficiently and effectively with a maximum impact for the benefit of the people of Ukraine. The Kremlin's goal is the military, political, and economic destruction of Ukraine. They want to undermine Ukraine's very existence as a state. We cannot and we will never let that happen. Since the beginning of the war, we have all mobilized. The European Union, for example, has mobilized around about 6.2 billion euros in financial support. And as you know, more has to come and more will come. We're fully aware that for the immediate relief, there is money flow, there is budget support necessary now. We will engage substantially. But here in this room, we also have to engage substantially in the mid and long-term reconstruction. And here in Lugano, the Lugano Principles are the first important building block guiding our way. President Cassis, once again, many thanks for making that possible. This is the foundation from which on we are working now to rebuild and reconstruct Ukraine, the Lugano Principles. I want to commend you and I want to thank you for organizing this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, we can never match the sacrifices Ukrainians are making every single day. Ukraine's youth is giving their life to turn vision into reality. They are fighting for a free and independent Ukraine. They are fighting for the respect of international law and our values. So we know that their fight is also our fight. And while we work in these days to help Ukraine to win this war, we must also make sure that Ukraine wins the peace. That will come for sure. Slava Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam President von der Leyen. Thank you very much. The Czech Republic has had the presidency of the European Union since the 1st of July. And now I'm delighted to welcome on stage Mr. Petr Fiala, Prime Minister of the Czech Republic. Welcome to Lugano.
Mr. President, Presidents, Prime Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity to address you. We meet here in Lugano for the 5th time. As in previous year, this year we planned to talk about helping Ukraine with reforms and would bring it even closer to Western community, or about good governance based of the rule of law. Instead, we are here to talk about defense of Ukraine and reconstruction. The reconstruction of a country that until February 24th this year was functioning normally, was prospering and working for a better life of its people. Part of the country was already occupied, but Ukraine was not threatening anyone and was not attacking anyone. Then came February 24th and a Russian attack. Europe changed. I think I am not the only one who would wake up every night since that day to see whether Kiev is still standing and it's independent. At the beginning, many of us didn't believe that it could become reality. Kiev, thanks to President Zelensky's leadership, has defended itself and most of Ukraine as well. Volodymyr Zelensky, Denis Shmyhal, and their team gave people courage, and they will to fight every day. When I arrived in Kiev on March the 15th, together with Prime Ministers of Poland and Slovenia, at that time there was still a curfew, checkpoints and roadblocks everywhere. Then I understood the reason why the city had not fallen. Every Ukrainian I met showed determination and the will to fight for their freedom. This only reinforced my belief that we must not leave Ukraine without help. My country, Czech Republic, started supplying arms to Ukraine even before the war. We continue to do so today, and we will continue to supply them in the next weeks and months. On the territory of our country, 370,000 Ukrainian women, children and elderly have found refuge, more than 3.5% of our population. On July the 1st, the Czech Republic took over the presidency of the Council of the European Union. The original priorities we had a few months ago are now significantly changed. We had to respond to the war. So, support for Ukraine, its post-war reconstruction, and also managing the refugee wave became the #1 priority. These three aspects are closely linked. In order to rebuild, we must help Ukraine to defend itself. We must continue supplying arms, humanitarian aid, but also money for day-to-day operations. In order for Ukraine to defend itself, its defender must be sure that their women and children are safe. That is why we are talking about managing the refugee wave. To be frank, I don't know when the full reconstruction of Ukraine can start. But I know, however, that we must be prepared. We can already start repairing some of the destroyed towns so that people can return home. We can already see people returning to their homes every day, and we must make it easier for them. 2 weeks ago, Ukraine and Moldova achieved EU candidate status. This was a clear signal that we are counting on these countries, that we will not leave them. It is obvious that a substantial part of the reconstruction will be on the shoulders of the European states and European Union as such. This is natural. We must show leadership, but we must also work with others, with all G7 countries, with the United Nations, with the World Bank, with International Monetary Fund and other international institutions. We must simply involve the whole civilized world in the future reconstruction of Ukraine. That is why I promise that we will cooperate as much as possible with the European Commission and the European Parliament during our presidency of the EU Council. We have no easy task ahead of us, but we will not let Ukraine down, and I am convinced that even Europe will emerge from this crisis stronger, safer, and more resilient. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Fiala. And now I have the great pleasure to call on stage an honored guest from Ukraine. Thank you for being here. An honored guest from Ukraine who is here in person. Please welcome Mr. Denis Shmyhal, Prime Minister of Ukraine. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Високоповажний пане президенте Швейцарської конфедерації, високоповажна пані президентка Європейської, шановні прем'єр-міністри,
President of the European Commission, dear Prime Ministers, dear Mr. Fiala, Mrs. Shimonita, dear friends, dear ladies and gentlemen. Half a year ago, we were actively planning the 5th Jubilee Reform Conference in Lugano, and we all wanted it, and it would be better for us if this conference remained a reform conference. But unfortunately, it happened differently. There's a war in our country. Daily air raid sirens, dead women and children, destroyed houses, roads, bridges and destinies, lives. Each of us would like to talk about ordinary things today, the growth of well-being, the strengthening of the market economy and the strengthening of the stability of society. But we'll talk about the extraordinary courage of Ukrainians, extraordinary challenges, extraordinary and incredible support of Ukraine by all civilized countries of the world, from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean, and surprisingly about extraordinary opportunities for Ukraine, for Europe, for the world, for each of us. These possibilities are what unite us. One prominent person said, "Unity is the key to victory in war of peace." At the same time, it doesn't matter. All the same, we're all united by the desire to live in security and peacefully, by the aspiration to never let it happen again, by the desire to have a home, to be near our family, by the hope that the world of our children will be better than our present. Today we're all united in our defense, tomorrow in our reconstruction. No, reforms have not disappeared from our lives. Moreover, to some extent, it is thanks to the reforms that I'm here in Lugano today. To a certain extent, thanks to the changes implemented by Ukraine all these years. Kiev did not fall, a number of regions were liberated from the invaders, and for the 130 days of the war, Russia has not achieved any of its goals. Decentralization, reform and independent local self-government made it possible to incredibly defend every city and every community on the ground. European aspirations allowed, on the most terrible day, February the 24th, 2022, to disconnect from the Russian energy system and quickly integrate into the European system, into COE. The reform of the banking sector allowed us to maintain financial stability. Digitalization has become the basis of the government's capabilities and controllability of the situation. And in the end, all the steps, all the reforms that were carried out in recent years allowed us to say with pride, Ukraine is a candidate for membership of the European Union. But it's time to move on. Today, we will talk about the recovery plan and recovery platform of Ukraine. We will discuss 24 volumes of the work of the National Recovery Council of Ukraine, which was set up under the leadership of our President Volodymyr Zelensky. We will discuss the vectors of rebuilding Ukraine. We have already done an extraordinary job. In 6 weeks, more than 3,000 Ukrainian and international experts, officials, parliamentarians worked out thousands of pages of their vision, what kind of country we are building, and most importantly, how we will restore our country. We looked at both successful cases and failures. Why did some succeed and others did not? Is it possible to copy the previous experience? What were the main success factors? We clearly understand that the recovery plan and the roadmap of this recovery must be ready before the end of this war. Of course, this plan can be adjusted depending on different circumstances, but its framework should be ready. And we know for sure that behind successful recovery cases, there are always partners or international coalitions that help in such recovery. That is why today we present the draft of our reconstruction plan right here in Lugano. It is important for us to unite friends of Ukraine all over the world and form a coalition for the recovery of Ukraine. It is important for us to show foreign governments and companies that Ukraine has a very clear vision of how we can become successful, become a member of the EU and realize the Ukrainian economic miracle. Ukraine's recovery plan is divided into 3 key stages. The first is to restore here and now what is possible and what is critical for people's lives. There is no water in the liberated Chernihiv. It is necessary to repair the water main here and now. In the Kyiv region, it is not possible to reach certain villages. Temporary bridges and crossings must be built here and now. This work is already underway. We're currently financing it with funds from the budget of Ukraine. The second part is fast recovery. The number of destroyed objects, even of basic infrastructure, is huge. Immediately after the end of the hostilities and the victory of Ukraine, it will be necessary to implement thousands of reconstruction projects, renovate schools, hospitals, build temporary housing, bring life back to destroyed cities and communities. The third stage of this plan is long-term transformation. It covers all areas, from education and medicine to the green transition and the new military-industrial complex. People, economy, infrastructure, these are the 3 foundations of Ukraine's recovery. We approach the preparation of each of these stages very systematically. Damage assessment, technical projects for the restoration of each specific object, regulatory issues, resource base for this recovery. We are already creating an e-map of Ukraine, where we record all the damage caused by the war. This map is constantly updated. Damages are documented and verified by several parties at once. Thanks to the advanced digital tools of the government and DIA web application, every citizen of Ukraine can submit information about their destroyed accommodation homes. About 250,000 applications are already in the databases. Further, local authorities verify this data and also supplement the database with information about destroyed and damaged objects of social and critical infrastructure, schools, hospitals, nurseries, boiler houses, administrative buildings. Everything is entered into electronic registers. In parallel with this, the Office of the President of Ukraine, our team in the government, as well as our partners from the Kyiv School of Economics, according to their international standards, are conducting work on the assessment of general damages. Today, Ukraine's direct infrastructure losses amount to more than $100 billion, more than 1,200 educational institutions, more than 200 hospitals, thousands of kilometers of gas pipelines, water and electricity network, roads and railways were destroyed or damaged. And we count in every object. And there will be a reconstruction project for each object. The map of the destroyed objects and the damage caused allows us to form the system I was talking about. Two key approaches to such recovery are regional and parametric. What is a regional approach? It was offered to our international partners by the President of Ukraine. It is about the regional responsibility of friends of Ukraine for the restoration of individual regions. As already said, our principle is united in struggle, united in reconstruction. Partners will also gain access and see the map of destruction. On the basis of this map, together with the government, experts and local authorities, they will prepare technical projects for the reconstruction and transformation of the region. It is not just about allocating funds for a destroyed school or a broken road. It is about the fact that partners can bring their unique experience and understanding of how to build a qualitatively new environment, how to form a new urban space, how to build new facilities according to the best standards. This synergy will enable the transformation of the regions. Build back better is an understandable and clear goal that we formed under the principle of regional recovery, all of us. The second aspect is parametric. This is a sector approach principle. For example, when we conduct a large energy efficiency campaign or a new housing construction, these campaigns will be based on European parliaments. First, it will mean a new quality of recovery. Secondly, it will mean clear rules of the game for private investors whom we want to involve in these projects. Thirdly, it will mean the further integration of Ukraine into the European Union. We already have 24 working groups for virtually every sector. These groups are visionaries, analysts, economists and bureaucrats. We want to write out all the plans in as much detail as possible under our circumstances. We have already spent thousands of hours of those discussions while developing our draft plan. This is how the appropriate structure of the Ukrainian recovery platform was formed: united in defense, united in recovery. The recovery platform that we propose to create will consist of several levels. The first is the high level, where the leaders of the states will be presented. It will be a board that will determine strategic directions and vision. The second level is the joint coordination group, which will consist of heads of executive power and decision makers from Ukraine, the US, the EU, United Kingdom, Poland and other partner countries. The third level is the thematic groups by sector, by industry direction. I already mentioned that today there are 24 groups of the National Recovery Council of Ukraine. Today and in the future we invite everyone who has experience and desire to make Ukraine better to join these groups. Our team proposes to create several offices for the recovery of Ukraine in order to conduct the most effective work in parallel. The head office, and the partners agree with this, should be in Kiev. Branches of this office will be in Washington, Brussels, London and other cities where partners want to establish those offices. The entire draft reconstruction plan was written on the basis of a number of key principles, such cross-cutting vectors, sticking to which will allow us to effectively change and rebuild the country. In particular, it is maximum possible safety for people and business. Recovery better than it was, build back better. Our goal is not just to restore glass and concrete, but to build a new country. European integration and meeting eligibility criteria of the candidate, and in the near future, confident membership in the EU. Rule of law, transparency and accountability in recovery, reconstruction of Ukraine with the maximum involvement of green technologies, digital tools during restoration and general digitalization, involvement of private capital in the reconstruction process. A very important message that I want to capture today is about transparency, openness and accountability. We involve all international partners in the process in order to demonstrate that the funds allocated for recovery are used as effectively, honestly and fairly as possible. Already, part of the funds that international partners provide to Ukraine go through the trust fund of the World Bank and the administrative account of the IMF. This makes it possible to increase the level of accountability and show exactly how these funds are used, who they go to, and how they help Ukraine and ordinary Ukrainians. We are initiating the establishment of an advisory group which will include European politicians, American and European economists known in the world. These are the professionals who will help not only form a strategy but also demonstrate our level of openness. And this exactly about this level of advice Mrs. President of the European Commission mentioned in order to continue our qualitative work. And last but not least, who should pay for the recovery plan, which is already estimated at $750 billion? We believe that the key source of recovery should be the confiscated assets of Russia and Russian oligarchs. The Russian authorities unleashed this bloody war. They caused this massive destruction and they should be held accountable for it. Russia's frozen assets, according to various estimates, range from $300 to $500 billion. Some countries have already started the process of not just freezing it, but confiscating these assets. Thanks to Germany for these first steps. We're grateful to the United States for drafting of national legislation. I'm sure that all partner countries will join the process and ensure this justice. The second source of recovery is grants and soft loans from international financial organizations and partner countries. The third and fourth sources are private sector investments, as well as budget contributions from individuals and corporations. The United 24 platform has started off very effectively in Ukraine. We are grateful to everyone who contributed and encourage you not to stop in this support. And the fifth source of recovery is Ukraine's own budget funds. All these voice parameters, resources, approaches and principles are already written in the draft of our plan, hundreds of pages and thousands of hours of preparation. Today we are starting a big discussion about the recovery plan for Ukraine. Thank you for the constant support of our state, you and your countries. Thank you for today's event, with which we begin discussing the recovery plan for Ukraine. Ukraine shall be victorious, there is no doubt about it, and we will rebuild everything. After all, we are united in defense, united in recovery. Thank you very much, dear friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Shmyhal. And now I'll hand over to the moderator Yves D'accord for the presentation plenary. Mr. Yves D'accord is the chairman of the Edgelands Institute. Bonjour et bienvenue.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, first of all, Prime Minister Shmyhal. I mean, it was a very impressive and comprehensive plan that you've just shown us. What we would like to do is, I know there's a lot of information, and it's important information. What we would like to do is, and stay with us, there will be more information. You will have the time this afternoon in the breakout sessions to really go more into detail. But what we would like to do now is with 6 high-level speakers that represent institutions, but also countries that are involved deeply in a recovery of Ukraine. We would like now to be able to really explore what the framework could be. And I would like to call on the stage, please. First, Your Excellency, Elizabeth Truss, please join me. You are the Secretary of State for Foreign Commonwealth and Development Affairs and Minister for Women and Equality of the United Kingdom. Please. I would like to call His Excellency Mr. Matthias Cormann. Matthias, you are the Secretary General of the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Welcome, Matthias. Pleasure to see you. I would like to call Her Excellency Mrs. Odile Renaud-Bassot. Mrs. Bassot, you are the President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Welcome. I would like to call His Excellency Mr. Valdis Dobrovolskis. You are the Executive Vice President of the European Commission. Welcome. Very pleased to see you. I would like to call Her Excellency Mrs. Anna Bierde. You are the World Bank Vice President for Europe and Central Asia. Welcome. Happy to see you. And I would like to call Her Excellency Mrs. Teresa Sverinska. You are the Vice President of the European Investment Bank. Please, welcome. And Prime Minister Schmidhal, I saw that you felt that's it, that's over. Not at all. Can I ask you to come back on the stage? Because what I would like to do, please, what we would like to do is to be able to ask you at the end your reactions, because what we'll hear right now is, in fact, international partner. You mentioned Ukraine has the lead when it comes to the recovery plan and the framework, but it is working with, in fact, international partner. And we have an amazing group of international partners that are able to tell us a little bit their challenge, their visions, their methods, and their priority. The big deal is you don't have a lot of time, as you know, so we'll try to do our best. Let's say 5 minutes maximum each of you, and we'll try to start. We would like to start with you, Mrs. Elizabeth Truss. You are the Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs and Minister for Women and Equalities. Please, would like to hear your priority and your visions about the recovery. Please.
Well, thank you very much, Prime Minister. Thank you to President Kassis for hosting the conference today. Ukraine's recovery from Russia's war of aggression will be a symbol of the power of freedom and democracy over autocracy, and it will show Putin that his attempts to destroy Ukraine have only produced a stronger, more prosperous and more united nation. The United Kingdom is resolute in its support for Ukraine's territorial integrity, and we will remain at Ukraine's side as it emerges a strong and thriving democracy. We've led on support for Ukraine during the war, and we will continue to lead in supporting the Ukrainian government's reconstruction and development plan. This needs to be a new Marshall Plan for Ukraine, and it needs to be driven by Ukraine itself. We will push for immediate investment and to drive economic growth, because it's absolutely imperative we get the Ukrainian economy going. We need to be able to support returning Ukrainians to Ukraine. We need to give people hope about the future, and we need to give them the means to be able to support themselves. Reconstruction should embed reform, modernisation, technology and transparency. And the United Kingdom is very pleased to join the Joint Reconstruction Coordination Group. It's our view that it's vital that that is open to partners right around the world. We need all of the free world supporting this effort. It must be open and comprehensive, and it must involve international organisations as are represented on stage at the moment. And it must involve all of those who have been active in helping Ukraine defend itself and who back Ukraine for the long term, through thick and thin, whatever it takes. The United Kingdom has committed to host next year's 2023 Ukraine Reconstruction Conference. President Kassis, we have a lot to learn from you. It's been a fantastic conference so far. And we're also exploring how we engage British businesses, tech companies and universities in that reconstruction effort. We're looking at how we can use English and Scotch law to ensure investors have the confidence to participate in the reconstruction effort. And we will use the might of the City of London and the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, which is based in London, to make Ukraine one of the world's top destinations for investment in 2023. We think there's a real opportunity for Ukraine to nearshore manufacturing, agribusiness, technology, to be an extremely vibrant economy going forward. And as the Prime Minister mentioned, the United Kingdom is actively looking at how we legislate to seize assets from those who contributed to this appalling war. It's vitally important that we acquire those funds for the reconstruction of Ukraine. The United Kingdom will be championing the recovery of the Kyiv region in response to President Zelensky's specific request of our Prime Minister for UK leadership. We believe that despite the appalling suffering, despite the terrible war crimes that have taken place, the devastation and the human cost, that Ukraine will emerge stronger and more successful after this war. President Zelensky, you've demonstrated that Ukraine is a bastion of freedom and democracy, and it's our duty, as your friends and allies, as the free world, to do whatever it takes to support you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can I ask you just a question? How will you guarantee, in fact, the ability to commit on long terms? Because we've heard, right? I mean, we are here for a long haul, and I'm intrigued to know how are we able as a country, and I would ask the questions also to the others, to be sure that we will be able to support, in fact, a sustainable, in fact, framework.
Well, to make it sustainable, the number one thing we have to do is to help Ukraine recover its economy in the shortest possible time frame. We heard earlier that a significant proportion of the Ukrainian economy has been destroyed. One of the key things we need to do is open the ports so Ukraine is able to export its agricultural goods. One of the things that the United Kingdom is looking at is how can we provide insurance to shipping companies to be able to get those goods out. So what we're interested in is how we can use the power and resources of the City of London to underwrite some of those financial risks, together with the international institutions that are represented here. But ultimately, as well as acquiring funds from seizing assets, we will also need to help Ukraine generate those funds through the recovery of their economy.
Thank you very much. I just saw some of body language around the table where you all committed and agree about the long terms, about the needs also to bring private sectors. I would like to hear you, Odile Renaud-Bassot. You are the president of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and hear your priority, but also maybe your challenge and methodology. Please.
Thank you. And a lot has been said already about the drama of this war, how terrible it is, how resilient Ukraine people and government is. And I would like to share with you 4 ideas, building, and because EBRD has been working in Ukraine, the first institutional investor in the country in the last years. We've been working in Ukraine in the last 30 years, hand in hand with the government. And I must say, I would never have thought that the word reconstruction in our name would be so relevant again, because, you know, we thought that reconstruction was done and now we would be on development and so forth. Now we are back to reconstruction. But I would like to share, on the basis of our experience in the ground, four ideas. The first one is, and it has been said, what is important to prepare for reconstruction is to support Ukraine now, because the more we do now, the easier the reconstruction will be. And that's why we continue to increase our risk in Ukraine, to finance Ukraine. We got some donor support to do that, but we also take some risk on our balance sheet, and we focus really on the real economy, supporting key infrastructures such as gas, helping to buy gas, supporting electricity network, railway, private sector companies, our clients, and municipalities. And I think this is very important to do it now and not to wait when everything will be settled in reconstruction, because the more, as I was saying, the more...
And if I may, it means no is not just for humanitarian. So what you're saying is also important to invest.
It's important to support the government who has budgetary needs, but it's also important to support the companies, public and private, and the municipalities that are working now in the ground. They are still suing for the campaign, a lot of things are still going on in the part of the country which is not under the bombing. So I think that it's very important, because the more we do now, the more it will give revenues for the government to sustain the war, to be sustainable and continue to function. So, and also it gives some work to the people and so forth. So it's very important. Second issue, it's very important to start thinking and preparing reconstruction now. And we need also to think at different scenarios. President Zelensky referred to tactical and strategic, and I think tactically what is important is that we will need to start rebuilding, reconstructing, while the war may be still on. And that is going to be a challenge, but I think we need to get prepared to that. And for the reconstruction phase, as EBRD, we are really ready to step up dramatically our financial efforts and to focus on the private sector, because it was said to reconstruct, you will need to rebuild and to strengthen the private sector, to attract foreign direct investment, to transform state-owned enterprise, to provide equity to companies, the private sector, which have been suffering through the war, to support SMEs, and really focus on competitive sectors such as agribusiness, metallurgy, but also digital, IT, and which are very strong businesses in Ukraine. And it will be, of course, also vital to rebuild vital infrastructure and to green the economy, as well as, I think, for a bank like this will be our key focus, as well as dealing with, you know, that we have a long experience on Chernobyl to make it safe, and there may be some need for investment in the nuclear sector, which is, as you know, quite a concern at that point of time. Third key thought I wanted to share is reform will be key. President von der Leyen explained that, and I think that for EBRD, who has been very much involved in the reform agenda in the country, with a lot of support to Ukraine reform architecture, a lot of 200 experts on the ground supporting the country, I think working on the rule of law, oligarchization, corporate governance, overall building back better, also the green transition, that will be very important. And it's clear that EU integration process will be a key anchor for the reform agenda. And fourth, and I will end there, international coordination and cooperation will be key. I think the framework put forward by the Ukrainian government and the EU Commission are very relevant and very appropriate. I think it will be very important to get it, this governance set up very quickly. I understand it already functions on the Ukrainian side. It's very important to set it up for the international partners, and because we need to have a common agenda, clear cooperation mechanism to avoid competition, but really enhance cooperation. All forces will be needed, all institutions will be needed.
Thank you very much. Matthias Kormann, you are the Secretary General of the OECD, very much involved, right, in the question of recovery Ukraine. So your priority, your methodology, maybe some reactions already of what has been said. Please, go ahead. You have a mic?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. And Prime Minister Šmihal, great to see you again. The OECD, firstly, let me say, stands in strong solidarity with the people and the democratically elected government of Ukraine. We, like all of us, want this atrocious war of aggression to end. We want victory for Ukraine, and indeed, we want peace for the people of Ukraine, and for us to be able to get into the job of rebuilding and the recovery for Ukraine as soon as possible. To further strengthen and deepen our policy support for Ukraine, we have established an OECD-Ukraine liaison office, which has started operating initially from Paris, but which we want to base in Kiev as soon as possible. And our approach is based on three basic principles, consistent with what others have said: Ukrainian ownership and leadership of the recovery process, a collaborative approach where we coordinate our efforts closely with all other international partners, and indeed where we focus on our core strengths as an organization, analytical and policy work, focusing on OECD best practice standards, experience sharing, and indeed capacity buildings. If I can just focus quickly on a series of work areas that we've focused on so far and opportunities for future collaboration. Clearly, there's going to be a huge need for investment in infrastructure. There's a huge need for finance, and for that finance to be managed by targeted and coordinated funds. An important first step is the appropriate prioritization of needs and the deployment of projects, and to do that well, reforms that we've worked on together pre-war should be continued and further reinforced. And from the OECD point of view, we certainly believe that we can offer our expertise in terms of best practice, governance standards, empirical analysis on smart cities, and to help further develop our joint efforts on decentralization, given regions, cities and communities will be so crucial in terms of driving the reconstruction process. Second, work on macroeconomic stabilization and economic recovery policies can be informed by a structured OECD economic trade and investment review with analysis and advice and recommendations, and we certainly believe that that would be a very useful contribution that we can make. Third, as Ukraine's damaged cities are rebuilt, we can provide best practice policy advice about urban planning and opportunities for green reconstruction. Clearly, Russia's war of aggression has severely disrupted economic and environmental progress in Ukraine, and as has already been mentioned, rebuilding a greener economy will help boost Ukraine's international competitiveness moving forward. So we're very keen here to build on long-standing EU-OECD work in this area. Fourth, we're ready to provide advice to help address long-standing issues with the business environment, including competition policy, support for small and medium enterprises, entrepreneurship, reform of state-owned enterprises, and indeed energy sector reform. Addressing competition, transparency and integrity issues will be essential to bring investors confidence. And in future, an overarching regulatory policy review could help provide guidance on improving administrative procedures and governance systems. Fifth, we believe we can help with further strengthening Ukraine's public institutions through continued support for anti-corruption institutions and reforms, and to support transparency and integrity of aid flows. In pursuing the implementation of the national anti-corruption strategy, we stand ready to support relevant bodies in Ukraine, and we very much welcome Ukraine's recent expression of interest to work closely with the OECD Working Group on anti-bribery. Our joint OECD-EU support for improvement in governance and management program, or SIGMA in short, has and will continue to support reforms to public administration and financial management in Ukraine. And indeed, that is a program which has a long track record over the past 30 years of supporting the transition of Central and Eastern European countries into successful market-based democracies, many of them now within the European Union. Finally, our expertise in migration, skills and education allows us to support on policies for the return of refugees and internally displaced people, which will be important as Ukraine designs and implements its reconstruction priorities. We're also assessing the skills of migrants from Ukraine and monitoring the flows and their composition, as well as supporting the continuity of education of children and final exams for youth in recipient countries. I might just leave it there. I sense that my time has come to an end. But it's great to be
one question. Thank you for that. One question, because I'm just hearing it's very impressive to list, just all the programs and the priority. Is there one major concern that you have right now?
Well, the major concern right now is that Russia's atrocious war of aggression continues, and obviously I think it's fantastic that we're all here together planning for the future, but I'd like us to be able to get into it as soon as possible. So that's the biggest concern I think we all share.
Thank you for that. I would like, So I would like to know the priority of the European Investment Bank. Teresa Savrinska, you're the Vice President. Your priority, you challenge the methodology, please.
Thank you. I would like to start with thanking President Cassis for the invitation and Prime Minister Shmyhal. It's a privilege to be here today and on behalf of the European Investment Bank to contribute to this recovery program, which will be inclusive, efficient and sustainable. As you know, we are present in Ukraine. We are being a substantial part of the economy of Ukraine over 20 years, so you know us very well, with the investment portfolio almost 7 billion euros. And I would like to stress that the European Investment Bank stands ready to continue support to Ukraine with the long-term financing. It has been mentioned many times today that we need to quick recovery, but also we need long-standing support for Ukraine. So we are ready to do it, but we also will continue to search for solutions to support urgent liquidity needs to the government of Ukraine and expand of the almost 700 million euros we have already provided towards this and in the first weeks of the war. As you know, the European Investment Bank has substantial experience in managing multi-billion economic recovery programs such as the Juncker Plan, InvestEU and Pan-European Guarantee Fund, COVID-19 crisis response instrument. So with this behind us, we can safely say that our ability to attract private investments and blend them with public sources will be a key for a quick, efficient and sustainable reconstruction of Ukraine. I'm very happy to see today impressive number of countries and organizations here in Lugano with a shared determination to support Ukraine and her recovery plan presented by the government of Ukraine today. We know that to succeed, we need all hands on deck, and as Adil said, we need strong coordination among IFIs because the scale of destruction is almost unbelievable. And following the first Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2014, the EIB worked together very closely with the government of Ukraine and the European Commission to help normalize life in eastern Ukraine, build schools, hospitals, roads, and offering a new future to citizens of Ukraine. And today I would like to concentrate on our proposal, on our idea to extend our support package for Ukraine with a new instrument, EU-Ukraine Gateway Trust Fund, created to become part of the Ukraine Reconstruction platform put forward by the European Union. And this fund would allow to blend potential contribution from the EU member states with contributions from non-EU organizations and partner countries to accelerate both post-war reconstruction and EU accession of Ukraine. By setting up the fund, we would strengthen the project-related arm of EU support to Ukraine. So, complement to the other instruments envisaged under the Ukraine Reconstruction platform with direct project-focused interventions would allow for a swift support of critical infrastructure to keep Ukrainian economy going and also to underpin integration into the EU and new economic model. What is very important, it would also catalyze private sector investments, which has been mentioned many times today, enable the economy to rebound. With the Trust Fund, the EIB is meant to offer flexible and efficient support to Ukraine in areas the country needs the most and adopt to all potential changes in priorities. And the new trust fund shall operate as a complementary part of the architecture under Ukraine Reconstruction platform, and in response to member states' requests, we have put together a mechanism for how a Ukraine Trust Fund will function. So we think that this additional instrument would be very supportive to attract not only private but also public financing, which not only public but also private financing, which is very important for rebuilding Ukraine.
Thank you, Teresa. Just before giving the floor to the last two panelists, I have a question for you. You just mentioned about priority, and you were not the only one, right? All of you, I can see there is some issue about prioritizing, and you said it's behind us when you were talking about COVID-19. I don't know if I understand well what you were saying. Do you feel that it's behind us? And in a way, how does that play with the priority that we are in front of us in a bank like yours?
I said that the bank launched the Pan-European Guarantee Fund, and we managed with the fund during the COVID-19 crisis to help corporates to survive. So our experience, is very helpful to create trust funds to manage in crisis situations. So, of course, we cannot compare crisis COVID-19 with the war, but managing funds, it is our specialty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like now to go to Mrs. Anna Bierde. You are the Vice President for Europe and Central Asia. And then we'll finish with you as an Executive Vice President of the European Commission. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Last year, we met in Vilnius at the Ukraine Reform Conference. And at that time, we welcomed the very important milestones Ukraine was reaching along its reform path and encouraged continued progress. I specifically talked about the impressive strengthening of the financial sector, the improved targeting and poverty impact of the social protection system, and how reforms in the health sector were helping Ukraine's COVID response. We welcomed the monumental passage of the agricultural land reform, a measure promising to transform Ukraine's economy after having been stalled for 2 decades. On July 1, just days before we gathered, the government opened the land market and the year ended with Ukraine on track for a record harvest. Indeed, when I addressed this forum 1 year ago, I said that thanks to the persistence with which the authorities had pursued reforms, Ukraine in 2021, despite the pandemic, was a stronger and more resilient country than at any time since its independence 30 years ago. What we did not know then, and what we have seen day in and day out since February 24th, was just how resilient. After more than 4 months of devastating attacks, Ukrainians are hard at work. The government, under the most extreme conditions, has continued to perform crucial administrative functions, including collecting revenues, making social and pension payments, delivering key social services, and teaching children. The international community has responded strongly, including the World Bank Group. In the 4 months since the outbreak of the war, the bank has mobilized $6.75 billion, including commitments and pledges from donors, to support the continuation of essential services and to help blunt the widespread human and economic impacts of the war. We're also supporting neighboring Romania and Moldova to mitigate the impacts of the war on forced displaced Ukrainians and on households, as well as building resilience and enhance competitiveness to reduce vulnerabilities to future shocks. As all of you know, Ukraine's current budgetary financing needs remain high, at about $5 billion a month. This means another $30 billion will be needed between now and December if the war lasts that long. The bank has prepared 2 fast dispersing operations to support the government during this difficult time. We have also, through our sister organization, IFC, mobilized support for the private sector. The expressions of interest to support Ukraine remain very strong, and we believe we are well positioned to build on the role we have played in mobilizing partner engagement, also in the recovery and reconstruction phase. In this context, I'm really pleased to announce today that we're also establishing a multi-donor resource for institutions and infrastructure for Ukraine facility. We see this facility as a way of channeling grants from partners to co-finance projects and support critical analytical and advisory work. I'm very, very happy to say that Switzerland, as our host, and I thank you, has kindly volunteered the first contribution that will start this fund for Ukraine, and we really warmly welcome others to join. In April, around the World Bank Group spring meetings, we produced a paper setting out a strategic approach to support Ukraine during and after the war, setting out 3 phases. The relief phase, which entails keeping the government functioning. I think we've all been astonished at how firmly the authorities have led on this front. The recovery phase. This phase begins when the conflict ends or abates and focuses on addressing the immediate physical and economic needs. But I think, as we have seen and heard, this is already happening where it can, with Ukraine repairing damage to restore services to its citizens on a daily basis. And of course, the resilient reconstruction phase, which is the longer-term rebuilding of the country, including leaving behind the weight of policies which inhibited Ukraine's growth and development before the war. Since April, we have been involved, together with support from the EU and other partners, in supporting Ukraine in the development of a detailed damage, loss and needs assessment. We call it a DNA. I wanted to share today that we have a couple of early findings from this report, and we will be releasing it in August. It very much reconciles with the numbers that have been expressed before, which is that we see about $100 billion worth of damages up to date in key sectors. But I also want to emphasize that we see a huge need, and the Prime Minister mentioned it, for demining, which is going to have to start right away because it's already causing a lot of problems, but it's going to also have to be a prerequisite for rebuilding. I would like to start, going back to where I began, I would like to just say that in supporting the authorities in rebuilding, we do need to support the government's continued efforts to strengthen economic management and institutions, which have helped the country sustain under such difficult conditions. Many of my colleagues have mentioned the areas that we need to focus on, so I won't go into them in detail here. But I would like to thank all the partners who have worked with us and who continue to work so hard and with such purpose over the past 4 months to support Ukraine. But most of all, I would like to express my admiration for the Ukrainian people, whose resilience and courage ensure that this day, today, would come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to hear Mr. Valdis Dobrovolsky. You're the Executive Vice President of the European Commission. I'm intrigued, of course, to hear the priority. We've heard already some priority led out by the President, but I would like to hear maybe your view and the challenge around that. And then, just for you, we have a few minutes. I really would like to hear you, Prime Minister, reactions. I know there is a lot of information, but just to have a bit of sense, and maybe 1 or 2 questions still for the people, please. No, go. First.
So, Honorable President Cassis, Prime Minister Schmichal, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Switzerland for hosting this conference. Your country has a world's oldest tradition of military neutrality, but Russia's aggression against Ukraine, it's not only against Ukraine, it's against the entire democratic world. So thank you for supporting Ukraine. Well, we see Ukraine as part of our European family, as shown also by our recent decision to grant Ukraine EU candidate country status. And this decision is also a recognition of Ukraine's long reform effort over many years. We continue to provide political, financial, military and humanitarian support to assist Ukraine in its fight against continued Russian aggression, and we will do so for as long as it takes. In total, this support now amounts to more than 4 billion euros since the beginning of the invasion, but still much more international assistance will be needed. The International Monetary Fund estimates Ukraine's balance of payment gap at $39 billion for this year alone. We are now working on providing a further 9 billion euros in new exceptional macrofinancial assistance program. The first part will come before summer break. It's 1 billion euros, well, after endorsement of European Parliament and member states. It will be complemented by support by other bilateral and multilateral international partners. For example, last week Germany provided 1 billion euros in grants to Ukraine, and United States paid out its first part, so $1.3 billion of its $7.5 billion support package. Ukraine has clearly demonstrated its aspiration and determination to European values and standards, and has done so already for many years since the Maidan Revolution in 2014. And in these years it has made a good deal of progress in many areas, like strengthening public administration, fight against corruption, and so on and so forth. Now it's clear that we need to structure our work into parts, so emergency financial support first and then reconstruction. As regards reconstruction, from European Commission side, we are ready to be involved and coordinate this process. That's why President von der Leyen announced the need for setting up the Ukraine reconstruction platform. So this would be a strategic governance body to coordinate and prioritize reconstruction efforts and resources, work on the financing for reconstruction, designing the vehicles, institutions and instruments, developing governance, creating accountability mechanisms to increase transparency and reduce risk of mismanaging funds, The platform would also monitor progress in the implementation of Ukraine's recovery plans, and one of its first tasks would be to endorse this plan or perhaps amend it as needed. And our proposal is to set up this platform on 3 levels: political, technical, and local. And it would be advised by advisory groups from private sector, cities and regions, as well as civil society. And clearly it will carry the work using all existing channels and with help of international financial institutions and private investment. Well, from our point of view, it also makes sense from the point of view of moving Ukraine forward on its EU path. So linking this work also with reforms related to Ukraine's approximation with the EU. And it would be open to all major donors, so we look cooperating very closely with them in reconstruction of Ukraine. And finally, just a final thought. At the end of the day, it's Ukraine itself which will and must take ownership of this reform effort and recovery plan, United 24, as presented by the Prime Minister. So I agree with the Prime Minister that Ukraine's reconstruction should be driven by Kyiv and fully supported by international partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister, you've heard, right, a lot of very positive feedback towards, in fact, your plan, but you've also heard that there's a clear expectations towards your government, right? High expectation. I'm intrigued to know a little bit how do you react to the expectation towards you and maybe 1 or 2 elements that you want to add. And maybe that will help us this afternoon when we will go in breakout sessions to know what are the critical questions that we need to work.
Thank you so much, dear colleagues, dear friends. Thank you for your kind words, for your huge work which we all together and each of you have made during these months for my country, for our people. Thanks to you personally, to your countries, to your organizations, because we feel this support. This support encourages us for faster win. It gave us hope to have peaceful times and reconstruct and recover my country. And this is crucially important for mental and moral feelings of our people, all of us Ukrainians. So thank you for this. All the main words and messages were tells from this scene, and I think that I will not repeat, but I understand and we all understand that fast recovery and global recovery of my country, this is a future. But now, today, we need absolutely strong support from all of you. And in sense of economical stability, in sense of macroeconomical stability, now we need very regular and strong financial support in sense of saving macroeconomical stability. Because after this, it will be much, much easier to begin recovery and rebuilding of my country. So this is, I think, one of the main messages how to save stability of the country right now.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And what I've heard from all of you is that you have a clear agreement about the fact that we need to invest now, here and now. I think it was very clearly said. And it's not just a humanitarian perspective, very clear economic and financial perspective, but also for long term. So thank you very much as panelists. I hope it was a useful and very interesting one, and it will help you to think about the framework in the afternoon. Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Yves D'accord, for the moderation. Thank you to all the participants. Now we will have a 30-minute coffee break in the foyer and in the garden. The first 3 breakout sessions will begin at 4 o'clock, and they will be focused on economic recovery, social recovery, and digitalization and recovery. I wish you a very productive afternoon. Thank you.
The walls are gone, but they are not what makes a house home. Even in the darkest time, life finds its way to the light, because the light is within us. And no matter how hard, scary and painful it is, we have a bright future. Every day we become stronger, from ruins to love, life and light. 121,000 destroyed buildings are not just statistics. For us, Ukrainians, it is still our home. Let's rebuild it together, united for the recovery of Ukraine.